Good evening. Hope you are all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Nedarim, Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis and Daf Chav Daled. We're starting at a Mishnah toward the bottom of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom, and we'll finish on the top of Chav Hey Amud Aleph at the second line. Relatively quick and easy Gemaras for tonight, and then tomorrow morning will be the shiur for Shabbos. Tomorrow morning's shiur will be at 7:15, and we'll be done in time for the 7:45 Shachris. The Mishnah begins 4 lines from the bottom on Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Af harotze lahadiras chaver shiyochal etzlo. If I want to make a neder that you had best eat at my house, so Yomar, what should he say? Yomar lo kol neder shani asi lidor hu batel. Any neder that I will in the future make will be nullified. That makes absolutely no sense.
Is that also a neder?
No, it's not a neder. It's a qualification which undoes all future nedarim. But here we have a non sequitur between the reisha of our Mishnah and the Seifa. The reisha was, if I'm going to make a neder to make sure that you eat at my house for Shabbos, then we say something that makes no sense, which is none of my nedarim count. The Gemara is going to pick up on that in a moment. Ubilvad sheyehei zachur b'shas neder, provided that one at least mentions this during the time of the neder. This whole Mishnah is miraf senigra. It is nearly impossible to understand at its face value. And the Gemara jumps right in. The Gemara says 2 lines from the bottom on Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, B'cheivan de Amar, I don't understand, says the Gemara. Okay, fine. So what does he say? Kol neder shani asi l'dor yehei batel. So then if I was trying to get you to come to my house and you heard me say none of my nedarim matter, I hereby make a neder that you will eat at my house, but none of my nedarim matter, which is what our Mishnah just said. Then lo shamale, you won't come over. V'lo asi b'hadeh. You won't come over for the meal. If all I was trying to do in the Mishnah was to convince you to come over, I did a terrible job. Here's a neder. I hereby make a neder that if you don't come over, you're asur b'hana, but none of my nedarim count. So says the Gemara, what's pshat in the Mishnah? And the Gemara at the top of Chav Gimel Amud Beis explains. The Gemara says, really, our Mishnah is chasure mechsera v'hachi ktani. Our Mishnah is missing material. And here is how our Mishnah should read. Really 2 totally different sections. Here's section number 1. If I want you to come over to my house, but you're being difficult, and I make a neder that if you don't come to my house for Shabbos, then I hereby make a neder that you get no hana from me. That is called nidre ziruzinhu. That is a neder just to move people along. And as we said in the beginning of this parak of Arba Nedarim, at the first Mishnah in the parak, that Mishnah indicated that there are 4 types of Nedarim that don't even count. And one of them is this. And if you can imagine good friends talking to each other, I'll say, you have to come over for lunch. You say, I'm not coming. Like, if you don't come over for lunch, you can never come over to lunch again. It's like being loving and being playful. Says the Gemara, that's not a neder ziru. That is a neder ziruzin, and it's not chal. Good. Now, what was the last part of the Mishnah? And here we get an insight into the eve of Rosh Hashanah. If a person would like it to be the case that none of the nedarim that he'll make in the upcoming year will count, Yamod b'Rosh Hashanah, he should stand up by Rosh Hashanah time. V'yomar kol neder shani asid lidor yehei batel. That any neder that I am about to make over the course of this year, it should automatically be batel. That's effectively what we say in Ataras Nedarim. Strangely, not these words, which we would have thought the sitter, the people who put together the Hataras Nedarim would have done, but this is the gist of it. Now, we've already learned in Maseches Nedarim that it's not necessarily perfect language or only one set of languages. There could be many languages to accomplish this goal, and this is one of the primary Mari Mukomos for Hataras Nedarim.
If you look at this, you can read it. It's not a prop.
I don't understand.
So why does it only affect that year? Why can't it be for the rest of your life when you say that?
That's a good question. I don't know. Why do we have to say Hataras Nedarim more than once in our lives? There's another example of this. In the bracha Barei Chalenu, we only bench this year. Sashana Hazos. Why do we do that? Similar style question, but I never thought about it in regards to Hataras Nedarim.
4 or 5 minutes before Rosh Hashanah starts.
Whatever.
We say it also.
Whatever. Like your question is excellent. I don't. You just say it once. Just say it once and never say it again. I'm going to give a balabatish answer just from just falling out of my mouth, which is that there's obviously something happening at every Rosh Hashanah where the previous one is no longer chal. Again, it's a broad answer, and I don't really know what the mechanics are, but it has to be something like that.
It has to be it's totally on him remembering it over the course of the year. So if you make it once as a 13-year-old, chance of you remembering what you're 60, but that's not.
That would be fine, except that we're going to reject this line of the Gemara. So, so the Gemara then says, to Stan's point, the Gemara then says, when does this work? 5 lines down. It only works if you remember at the time that you make the neder. Says the Gemara, that's backwards logic. If in fact, let's say I did Ataras Nedarim, on Aleph Tishrei or whatever, the day before Aleph Tishrei, and then in Mar Cheshvan, I'm feeling inspired and I want to make a neder. So the Gemara says that if you remember what you said on Rosh Hashanah, then your neder doesn't count. That's what the Gemara seems to say. But the Gemara asks a question: if in fact it's true that you remember, then akira lisna eha v'kaim la nidre. It should be the exact opposite. If in Mar Cheshvan, when I decide that I want to make a new Kabbalah, I make a neder, and I say I remember what happened on Rosh Hashanah, and I'm still going to make a neder, that means I don't care about what I did on Rosh Hashanah because I'm thinking about it and still making a neder. So the Gemara says if you have in your mind what happened on Rosh Hashanah, that should uproot what you did on Rosh Hashanah as it relates to what's happening in Mar Cheshvan. That's the Gemara's question here. If you're remembering in Mar Cheshvan when you're making a neder, if that's true, then akrei litzna eha v'kaim lo nidre. Says the Gemara, then that neder should be chal. So how does Ataras Nedarim work? The mechanics don't even count. I'll take it.
Only the latest one counts?
According to the Gemara's question, Ataras Nedarim, if you remember that you did Ataras Nedarim as you make a new neder, by definition, the neder counts. So then what are the mechanics of Ataras Nedarim?
What about if you have done anything in between? Do those get?
Without paying attention, for sure those are Nedarim. That's what's implied from the Gemara. Whatever, it's not even really mafreya. It's just not in the years prior. Rosh Hashanah cleans the slate of the past year.
Right.
So in the upcoming year, between Aleph Tishrei and today, let's say we're a couple months in, right? So then if I made a neder yesterday, and according to the Gemara's first version, as we're looking at it now, if I wasn't thinking about Ataras Nedarim, so then the Gemara seems to say that is when you, which one is it? Kol neder shani asid lidor yehed batel. When does Ataras Nedarim work? Only if you remember B'shas neder. Otherwise, the neder is chal. Says the Gemara, Abaye and Rabbi have a machlokes about this. If they're a third of the way down on Chav Gimel Amud Beis, Amar Abaye, there's a mistake. Tani ubilvad she lo yehi zacher b'shas neder. The only time your neder remains invalid is if you forget that you did something. If you remember that you did Ataras Nedarim and then you're still making a neder, you clearly want to make a neder. Right. So that's Abaye's answer. Rava disagrees. Rava Amar le'olam kidei amrinan me'ikara. No, disagree. The initial language is correct, and really the Brisa says ubilvad shehi zacher b'shas neder. But hacha b'mayaskin, and we're not talking about a regular case of neder. Rather, kigon shehisne b'rosh hashanah b'liyada b'mahisne. You made some kind of conditions. I'll only make the following kinds of nedarim throughout the year, but you don't remember what we've done that probably every year of our lives. We're like, oh, I am feeling it. You make a Kabbalah and like. Come Yom Kippur, you're like, I don't even know what sugya was about. I don't even know which of my averas we were talking about anymore. So that happens all the time to people, and it's really those are big shilas. They can cause a lot of problems for us. So then the case that we're talking about is where we don't know what the conditions were that you made by Rosh Hashanah. The hashta kanadar, and now it's cheshvan, and you're making a neder. Izachur b'shas neder. If you're making a neder in Mar Cheshvan, the Omar al das harishona ani noder. I'm making a neder based on that which I don't even remember, but it was that which happened on Rosh Hashanah. That's nedereh les be'mamasha. You're making a neder in Mar Cheshvan tied back to an episode that you don't really remember in detail. That's not a neder. That's not a neder. But what if lo amar al das harishona ani noder? What if he doesn't say that? He just says harei alai X, it makes a proper neder. Then says the Gemara, if he doesn't say that, then akrei lisna eha b'kaim l'nedrei. Then his whatever conditions he had on Rosh Hashanah are now uprooted, and his neder is actually chal. So machlokas Abaye and Rava in regards to the mechanics of, I should say it's really a new kimta by Rava. But the question is, how does Ataras Nedarim really work? Does Ataras Nedarim really work if you remember it throughout the year, or when you don't remember it throughout? It's very interesting. This should be a Dvar Torah that we've heard from the pulpit a couple of times. It's like that kind of piece of Gemara. Anyways, this is obviously a big deal because Ataras Nedarim is important. And Rav Huna Bar Chinana Savar LeMidrash B'Pirka. He wanted to give a public speaking seminar on this whole topic. He wanted to talk about the Nedarim by Rosh Hashanah, Ataras Nedarim, and whether or not you had it in mind. And the Gemara gives a fascinating response. Amar Le Rava says back to Rav Huna, Tana, the author of our Mishnah, the Mishnah that we just started with today, on the bottom of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, Tana Kamastim La Stume. He wrote our Mishnah in a completely convoluted way. Kidei shelo yinahagu kalus rosh b'nedarim. The reason why he wrote the Mishnah the way he did, by the way, that's not pshat in our Gemara from the top of the page. When we say chasurim mechzar v'hachik tani, we're rewriting the Mishnah. But here, the Gemara seems to not be that way. This is a historical question of whether or not we accept the current text of our Mishnah or the modified text of our Mishnah. But what does Rava say? This Mishnah was written specifically in a convoluted way. Ve'at drashas le b'pirka. You're going to get up and talk about it in public? Come on, like these are not the things to talk about. So we've seen this throughout Shas before, that there's halacha ve'ein, what's the line? Ve'ein morin king. So is the din, you come ask me, I'll tell you. I asked Rabbi first a Shiloh once, I asked Rabbi Gilad Schwartz a similar Shiloh. I said, give me an answer to X, and they said, only in person. That's what Rabbi first said to me. And Rabbi Gilad Schwartz said, well, I'm not even going to buy. He said, I won't even answer the Shiloh. So it was fascinating. I was doing chassan classes, and some it shouldn't be complicated, but some somewhat complicated shilas, actually based on the Gemara Nedarim Daf Chaf that we learned about, came up as halacha l'maisa shilas for young couples. And I asked Rabbi Gilad Schwartz. He said, it's taka, a big problem. I was standing in the Beis Din. I had brought my Hillel Torah kids. I was a Rebbe there at the time. I went there and I asked Rabbi Gilad Schwartz, like quietly, of course, away from the kids, like how do you guide couples in these areas of kedushas tashmish amita? And he says it's a very important sugya. I said, okay, give me a couple of psakim. And he's like, that's all we're going to speak about today. And I'm like, okay. And then I asked Rabbi first. He said, you have to come over to have that conversation. We wouldn't even do it over the phone. So there are things like that. This is obviously the different sugya, but the concept is the same. We're stop talking about it. We don't want people making Nedarim. It's a bad idea. Don't make Nedarim. It's just going to get us in trouble. 2 lines from the bottom. Chav Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Ibaylahu. We saw in our Mishnah, of course, the Shita Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Now, if you just look back for a second, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov had said that if you want to be madir your friend, so then there are ways to do it, but it would be considered nidrei zeruzin. Okay. Now the Gemara says that din of Rabbi Elazar, Ibaylahu pligi rabbanon alei Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov alo. Our Mishnah, is it a standalone? Everyone agrees to this Mishnah, or no? Is really there a contrast between the author of our Mishnah, which is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, and the Rabbanan? And v'im tim salomar pligi, last line. And even if you want to say they're arguing, how do we pass it? Hilchasa kavase olo. Meaning, do we view this as nidrei zeruzin or not? This case in our Mishnah, you had better come to my house for Shabbos lunch, and if you don't, I'm never having you for Shabbos lunch again. Again, it's out of love. So do we paskin like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? Is there even a dissenting opinion? We are going to learn the next full amud on this one question. We're going to see 4 approaches. The 4th approach is the one that we'll accept, and that's the one which will bring us to the Mishnah on the top of Chav Daled. Let's learn answer number 1, or approach number 1, which will be rejected. Tashma, we learned in a Mishnah, Ditnan, Ha'omer lechaveiro, a man says to his friend, top of Chav Daled Amud Aleph, Konem she'eni nehenelach, you can get no hana, I can get no hana from you. Im I ata notel levincha, if you don't take for your son, kur shel chitim v'shtei chavios shel yain. You're in my house for Sunday barbecue. If you leave my house without taking a 6-pack of beer and whatever else, if you leave, you can never eat in my house again. So what's going on here? Hareza yachal hatiris nidrom shelo al pi chacham. You are allowed to just be to dissolve the neder even without a rav. Why? Sheyachol lomar lo. He can say back to him, "Klum amr sela b'shvil kvodi." You're just trying to be a nice guy, but really zeu kvodi. It's really my honor to not take your stuff. So you're being like just overly strong language. I did a bris for a family a couple months ago. They sent me home with 15 candy apples when I left the bris. They also paid me. They didn't pay me with candy apples, but they're like, would you like some candy apples? I'm like, they're like, you're going to take candy apples. And they handed me like a big paper bag with the handles. And they were like literally 15. I came home from the bris. My wife was like, seriously? Was this how they compensated you? I'm like, no, I got some shekel also. So it was the same thing. They're like, oh, you cannot leave without eating food today. Today, Taka came up. Great halachic shaila. Conservative show. I was in Bethel Synagogue this morning. Rabbi Schwab, I can't remember his first name. Yeah, he's like my age, maybe a drop holder. And I'm looking around the room, and one of the waiters recognized me. He works for Aviva Applebaum. So he says, Phil, are you going to eat? I said, what's with the kosher? This guy's a goy d'oraisa mamish, but he knows. He really knows. He's like, all the food is kosher. It's from Hungarian and from Jewel, Osco, everything. It's all good, but it's under the hashgacha of Rabbi Schwab. So I'm not touching it. That's a chil Hashem. Now, if you're from a yid, you cannot. I didn't touch one food, not even water. I wouldn't touch anything in those cases. Like, you have to be vigilant about not participating. One picture of me in Bethel eating a piece of fruit, yeah, and then that's like Orthodox rabbi foregoes kosher for the sake of $100,000. So fine, that's already that's already in our case what we're talking about here. Zeu kvodi. That's obvious that's the case, that he's just doing it to be nice. So what the Gemara makes a diuk. Taima d'amar zeu kvodi, but that's only because when I left their house, I'm like, no, I don't even want to take your food. But halav hachi, if he didn't say that, so then nederhu, then it should taka be a neder. And that seems to not be like Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. Some money. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, it should have been nidrei zruzin habe, and it wasn't, because here we said that the neder was binding. Ella says the Gemara, Shma mina pligi rabbanon alei. We therefore see as a diuk from this Mishnah that there must be a shita in the Tanoim that disagrees with Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. So that's attempt number one. Very nice attempt, and the Gemara rejects it. Really, Lolam Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. It really is Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, but this case was different. Umoda Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov b'hai dinidrahave. In this case, even Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, who typically would say that it's nidrei zruzin, here he would say that it's considered a neder. Why? The Amar le lo kalba ana. I am not a dog. Dimis hanina minach, where I benefit from you. V'lo mishanis minoi. And you won't benefit from me. There's like normal reciprocity in a circumstance. So the assumption of the Gemara is that he had already given me something, and I'm trying to give him something back. Even Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov would say in that case that the neder is binding. So there's really no raya.
To give something and then know that you're not price to give it.
No. It's not that you have an achrayas to give it back. It's that if a person makes a neder when they're trying to reciprocate, that neder is binding.
No, I'm saying,
but without a neder, there's no chiyuv. Yeah, I can give you a matana any day of the week.
okay, I thought you were speaking a lot about giving a gift to somebody with the expectation or understanding that there's a gift coming back.
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the context, I presume. No, I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I know there's like shilas by ribbis when you're borrowing, like, can you do a carpool for me, and then I'll do two carpools for you. The poskim discuss these shilas, whether or not that's considered ribbis, because I borrowed from you and then you're paying me back double.
There's something more pleasant about.
You get paid for doing carpool?
Doesn't have to be money.
There is a money component.
And I that we're seeing shit out.
Yeah.
And we were mentioned that they swap meals for each other.
Mhm.
They're still in the same planet, but out of friendship, they swap
Mhm.
meals for each other. But with you that normally to swap meals, you said you run a price to swap something there.
Mm.
Hopefully you do that.
Vague recollections of the Gemara, but I don't know the halachic issue there. Don't know. Let's try the second raya to answer our question as to whether or not the shita of Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov in our Mishnah is a standalone shita, or if there is a dissenting opinion. Tashma, very, very similar Mari Makom. The Gemara says as follows: Ha'omer lechaveru konim she'ata nenes li. You cannot benefit from me. Im i'ata nosein livni. If you don't give to my son a kor shel chitin u'shtei chaviyos shel yain, to give over a significant amount of wheat and 2 barrels of wine. This is a machlokes. Rav Meir Omer ad sheyitain. Rav Meir Omer, what does it mean? Ad sheyitain. So if you take a look at the Hagos Habach, he adds in a couple of very important words. Rav Meir Omer, aser ad sheyitain. That means that the neder is binding. Seemingly, Rav Meir seems to say the neder is binding, and that until you give that over to his son, so then you're not allowed to benefit. Here too, the Gemara says, like we saw in the previous case, although in the previous case, Rav Meir did not say that the neder was chal. Here the Chachamim say you can get out of it. Halfway down on Chaf Daled Amud Aleph, Sheyachol Omar Hareini Ki'ilu His Kabalti. I could say that you already gave me stuff. I don't need you to give me anything else. And the Gemara says, "Time Adamar Hareini Ki'ilu His Kabalti Halav Hachi Nederhu." So we're making a very similar diuk from this brisa as we did from the previous one, and therefore, what's implied is that if in fact he didn't say Hareini Ki'ilu His Kabalti, then it's binding as a neder, and that's not like Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, because Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov would have said it's nidrei zeruzin, and nidrei zeruzin are not binding. Yet here it seems like a neder. The Gemara says money. Who could it be? Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, had he been the author of this Mishnah, he holds Nidre Zeruzin Habe, and for sure it would not have been a binding neder. Elalav, maybe it must be the Rabbanan who pligi. So this is attempt number 2. And the Gemara here gives a very similar answer, though not talking about a dog. La'olam Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov could also be the author of this Mari Makom. Umoder Rabbi Elazar b'hai the Nidra Have Mishum de Amar Le Lav Malka. I'm not a king. The Mahanin Allah, where I give you things, va'at lo mahanisli, and you don't reciprocate to me. So very, very similar answers. Very similar answers. Let's try attempt number 3. 2/3 of the way down. Amar Le Mark Shisha B'Reder Chizda Rabashi. This is an interesting frame because it's coming from the Amoraim in name, right? It's not very common. Usually Tashma. A little bit of, I don't think it's a big deal. It's just unique in its presentation. Tashma, Nidre Onsin. Our Mishnah at the beginning of this parak of our Nedarim spoke about Nidre Onsin. If a person makes Nidre Onsin, we had said that that's considered to not be chal. What was that case? Person makes a neder that they're going to eat a meal in a certain place, and then v'chalahu o chalav beno o sheikvo nahar. He got sick, his son got sick, or the river, the bridge fell out, or the river swelled and he couldn't cross the river, whatever the case may be. So says the Gemara, that's not binding. Halavachi, but had those things not happened, nederhu. Says the Gemara, money. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Zeruzin Habe. That would have been considered a language of Zeruzin, because we saw in all the previous Mari Makomos that whenever somebody says, come over, and if you don't, there's a neder. Even in those cases, forget the bridge, forget the sick kid. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he was of the opinion that that should be Zeruzin Habe. It's a neder Zeruzin, and it's not Chal. So it says the Gemara, Elalav, it must be Rabbanan Upali. That's our 3rd attempt, and the Gemara rejects this one as well. No, la'olam Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Umi sabris de adre mazmina lezamina. Do you really think that what happened here is the mazamein, the person who was doing the inviting, was the one who generated the neder by his own volition? That's not what happened. Lo, and the Gemara gives an ukimta. Really, de zamina adre lemazamna. Really, the person who was invited was the one who caused the inviter to make the neder. De Amar, what was the case? To Amar Le, Mizamenes li lesudasich. Can I please come over for dinner? Can I invite myself over for dinner? And the Gemara says, Amar Le, in, of course. So then the person who just invited himself and imposed neder ze alayich, can you make a neder to force me to show up? You ever you ask a friend, can we go out for coffee? Promise me you'll show up. So this guy's saying, make a promise against me that I should show up. I'm lazy. I don't like I'm putting on my clothes after 6 p.m. I'm just going to sit in my pajamas. No, you got to get dressed and come out. Fine. So vinodar, the guy makes a neder. So what happened here? The guy who was invited asked the host to make a neder on him. And then everyone agrees, even Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, in such a case, that it's nidre onsin. All right, so that didn't work either. 4th and final try. This one will work, and we'll actually get to see. Let's just ask our question for the 4th time. Do, in fact, we have a machlokes from our Mishnah between Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov and anyone else? Or is it categorical that we just accept the sheet of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? So Tashma, 4 lines from the bottom, Chav Daled Amud Aleph, Yeser al Kain. Those words are not really meant for us. They're a quote from another place. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Amar lechaveru konim shani nehen elach. I'm going to make a konem, a neder against you if you're not a guest at my house, but tochal and eat my food, paschama, warm bread, v'tishta imi kos chamen, and have a cup of coffee with me. I make a neder against you if you don't do it. Very specific neder, by the way. Does it mean you have to go there and eat hot bread? What if you're gluten-free? All of a sudden you have, what is this neder? It's crazy. V'hala hikbid kenegdo. The other guy's like, forget you, make any neder you want. I'm not coming over. Af elu nidre zruzin, lo chachamim. Oh wow! So here we see in the Brisa of lo chachamim, we see that the Tanakama wanted to say af elu nidre zruzin, which is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, and now what do we see in the last line? Lo chachamim. We see, forget about inferences, because that's how we tried our first 3 approaches. Here it's black on white. We see that there's a bar plukta against Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov from our Mishnah at the beginning of the day, from the Mishnah on the bottom of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. My love. My lo hodu chachamim, hodu lo chachamim. What does it mean that the chachamim did not agree with him? Lav, is it not the case as we turn to the top of Chav Daled Amud Beis, De'afilu b'kamaisa, and all the other cases as well? If here in this Mishnah we see that there's a bar plugta against the sheet of nidre zeruzin, obviously it existed everywhere else as well, and therefore says the Gemara, shmamina pligi rabbanan ale shmamina. Beautiful. So the Gemara asked a question. is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, does he have a bar plukta? We brought 4 rayas, 1, 2, and 3 got rejected. 4 revealed that the previous 3 were actually also subject to a machlokes. Not dafka that all the inferences were correct. That's its own shaila in the Rishonim. At least it should be. But the point is that we do see that there's a bar plukta. And the Gemara wants to know, my have Allah. That's great. Thank you very much. But if you'll remember when the question said, V'in Tim Salomar, that there is a bar plukta, who do we paskin like? The Gemara was foreshadowing because the Gemara knew what the answer was to the question. So my habe Allah, who do we paskin like? Do we say that these cases are like Nidrei Zeruzin? You're going to come to my house, and if you don't, you can never come to my house again. Do we paskin like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that case is a case of Nidrei Zeruzin, and therefore the neder is not chal? Or do we paskin like the Chachamim that it's mamash and neder? Says the Gemara, Tashmad, Amar Rav Huna, Halacha Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, V'chein Amar Rabbi Bar Ava, Halacha Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Those Nedarim are not binding. So you are welcome to show the love to someone when you invite them to the house. You're coming to my house. I'm not taking no for an answer. If you don't come now, you can never come again. And everybody knows it's like a little, it's playful. It's playful. It's a nice way to show people you care about them. I would still avoid the neder language if you can, but even if you did, seemingly, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would pass in their Nidrei Zeruzin, and they don't even get started. A little bit more. New Mishnah. Nidrei Havai. What about exaggerative types of Nedarim? And we're going to see a couple of examples of that right now. Amar Konam im lo ra'isi baderech hazeh ke'olei Mitzrayim. I hereby restrict myself from something if I don't see the number of people that were Olei Mitzrayim, 603,550 men. By the way, that doesn't count any women. It doesn't count anyone over the age of 60 or below the age of 20. Millions of people. So the number is pasha that it's exaggerative. Even in the biggest sports arenas in the world, okay, 50,000. It's a lot of people, but it's not 600,000 people. So it says the Gemara, that's a Nedri Havai. That's considered to be an exaggeration. I hereby forbid upon myself to drink Coca-Cola if whatever. It's just crazy. Or im lo re'isi nachash kekoras beis habad. If I don't see a snake that's the size of the beams of our house. The Baal Mishnah clearly did not see anaconda. That Mishnah was a big snake. So here the Gemara says there were no snakes that size. They'd never seen them. We know there are snakes bigger than what they saw in Bavel. That's for sure. Well, this might have been Eretz Yisrael because Rabbi lived in Eretz Yisrael. But still, the snakes weren't so big. But the point is, if you say something that's impossible, you say something, like if I see a challah that's the size of a house. So people do this. They have these like competitions for the biggest pizzas in the world. We have this now. They didn't have crazy people like that back in the day. They didn't do that kind of crazy stuff. The longest fingernails, Guinness Book of World Records stuff. So we have a problem because we know that there are some crazies out there who do these things. So then what if you make a riot that sounds exaggerative, but like there are people out there who do that? Okay, that's a good question. I don't know how that works. But here the Gemara was saying that these things were unheard of. So they don't count. Says the Gemara, we have a line that needs to be understood. This is a difficult piece of Gemara. The Gemara says, Tana, we have a brisa. Nidrei havai mutarin. If you make an exaggerative neder, mutar, that doesn't count. The neder is not chal, and it's mutar to do whatever you said. And shavuos, but if you make a similar line, not a neder, but a shavua, and it's havai, then asurin, then it is binding. Namely, this whole idea of exaggeration only plays a role with nedarim and not with shavuos. Okay. What is an example of Shavuos Havai? So, if you say, I'm making a Shvua that X is true if I don't see Midam Kamar, did you even say anything? Because you can't say Lo Ra'isi as it relates to the Shvua. It has to be a statement that's actually happening, not a lack of happening, which is not true by Nedarim. Amar Abaye, what must be the case? The Amar Shvua She'Ra'isi. It must be that I made a Shvua that I did see something and that works. Okay. Amar Le Rava. Rava says, Im Kain, if you saw something, pashat that it's going to be a shvua. That's a regular classical shvua. Im Kain, lamali l'meimar. Not only that case is not dumya, the neder katani. We said in the brisa in the open of this section of the Gemara that the nidrei havai are mutter, and in a similar case, the shvua savai is not mutter. So you gotta give me a level case between both worlds. Ella Amar Rava says, and this answer really requires time and rishonim, and it's a difficult answer. The Gemara says, Ella Amar Rava, 4 lines from the bottom. The Omer, the case is as follows: Ye'asru peiros ha'olam alai. All the fruits of the world will be forbidden to me. Bishvua, in a shvua. Im lo ra'isi baderech hazeh ke'olei Mitzrayim. This sounds like the problem, not like the solution. But this is how Rava paints the case. And according to you have to look in some of the rishonim here. Let's take a look here. If you look at the Mefaresh, 6 lines from the bottom, Ella Amar Rava, the Amar Hachi, he said as follows: Yasru kol haperos olam alai b'shvua im lo ra'isi v'lo ka'amar she ra'isi. Very subtle differences here, but this is the case that Rava says is where you have a neder havoi, which is mutter, and a shvuas havoi, which is aser. And the Gemara just ends with one last piece, and this is really, really important for the world of Nedarim, which is what if someone speaks with like a turn of phrase? How does that work? So it says the Gemara, Amalei Ravina Ravashi, the Dilma Hai Gavra, maybe when he was talking about the 600,000 people, he wasn't talking about 603,000 people. That's not what he's talking about. But it was a kina de shum shemani chaza. He saw an army of ants. And if you see ants that are really densely packed, I mean, you could have millions of ants. 600,000 is an achievable number. So says the Gemara, V'asik lahon shema ole mitzrayim v'shapir mishtaba. Shema, V'asik lahon shema, and he just simply called them, oh, look at these ole mitzrayim. It's his way of saying it's an exaggerative number. We do things like that all the time. What would be a stadium of people? We say throngs of people, whatever. We're not talking about numbers. There's a million people here. So it's just a turn of phrase. So says the Gemara, maybe we should say that if in fact he was really referencing the number of ants and he just called them Oli Mitzrayim, maybe it should be Chal. So says the Gemara, and this is so important, we're going to be stopping with these last 2 lines on the top of Chav Hey Amud Aleph, Amar Lei, Ki Mishtaba. When a person is making a Shvua, the language that he uses is Adaita Didan Mishtaba. It has to be a language that's the normal language, the normal way to refer to things. Now, how would it work, Lamaisa? Let's say it is normal to say 1 million people. I'm going to hereby forbid this about myself unless there's 1 million people on the road. So what does he really mean? He doesn't mean 1 million people. It means, what was it, 1,000? Like, what does it mean? And that is the way we talk. And our language is very non-specific. Like my daughter in the car tonight said to my son, little Abi, my daughter said, we're literally there. I'm like, we're not literally there. Literally means literally. And we're not literally there. We'll be there in a few minutes. Literally is when you're parked. And I was just being like an annoying, picking on the language dad, but it's good for kids to hear about honesty a little bit here and there. But here I'm curious how it would work, because here they're saying with the ants, nobody talks that way. No one knows what you're talking about. If nobody knows what you're talking about, the shvua can't be chal. However, if we do talk and say 1 million, then maybe it would be chal. But then what's the number that triggers the shvua? Minion? Is it 10? I have no idea. But the inference from the Gemara is that we are allowed to talk in a Lashon B'nai Adam when it comes to Shavuos. We're not allowed to make up our own language and say, oh, there are so many ants in the ground. They're the old Mitzrayim. You're just weird. That doesn't count. It has to be a normal language. So I don't know the answer to the question. Food for thought. We'll pick up again tomorrow morning at 7:15 with Daf Chav Hey, which is the blot for Shabbos. And Mr. Hashem, I'll see you then. And if I don't see you tomorrow, then I'll see you after Shabbos. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
The only thing that is an agreement